The original Journey into Imagination attraction was way ahead of its time. Journey into Imagination, the original ride, was a attraction that opened a year after Disney's Epcot Center was opened. The original Journey into Imagination stood in the World Showcase area where you would see Journey into Imagination, the Imagination Pavilion, The Land, Spaceship Earth, and many more. The attraction was led by the Imagineer Tony Baxter and the rest of the Walt Disney Imagineering team, with beside the fact that Michael Eisner was also dropping in as the brand new CEO at the time for Walt Disney by itself for the company. The original Journey into Imagination was one of the most advanced rides that ever existed in the 1980s. And why do I say that? Well, because of the fact that many thought and creative ideas went into this ride by itself, you can already tell just by the layout of the ride by itself as well that they really wanted to go at it with this ride and try to make it as creative as possible, and they did just that. The ride impressed many people from around the globe and also impressed many critics for those that rode the attraction. And the original Journey into Imagination was one of the most amazing rides to ever exist in the original days of Epcot Center, or currently as now known as just Epcot. Journey into Imagination, the original attraction, is heavily a missed ride, and many people do really wish for the original ride to come back, which I certainly do hope that happens later in the future as time progresses. Now, the layout by itself was a 10-minute ride, and it definitely went over everything that you can think of. It went over nightmares, created through the creativity side. It went through introducing to Dreamfinder and Figment. And I mean, basically, the entire ride itself was just based on teaching everybody what the imagination is all about and what you can use with the power of just one little spark of imagination. The ride itself was certainly a ride that was ahead of its time, and I am so honestly impressed with how this ride turned out to be, even though, of course, I wasn't around to experience this kind of ride. But for those that had the experience to ride such a ride like that, I'm pretty confident that they would say too, as they would agree, that the original Journey into Imagination attraction was certainly a ride of prime, and it was definitely ahead of its time, especially in such the early years in the 1980s. And it kind of really brought out a lot of happy faces and a lot of happy thoughts, and it really showed the world that these people who built these rides can really share their creative side and let their imagination run wild when they're trying to create such an amazing attraction like this. Now, when you begin inside the ride at the very beginning of it, you get to see a monitor reflection of the Dreamcatcher collecting sparks of imagination through the sky as he is riding his dream blimp. Afterwards, you get sent into a rotation room where the vehicles will be dragged along as you follow Dreamfinder, his Dreamcatcher, and his best new friend, imaginary friend, Figment, which is basically the purple dragon that you see on your screen. Figment is basically of course, the imaginary friend of Dreamfinder. Dreamfinder would then have created Figment out of his Dreamcatcher after just collecting so many sparks of imagination. And of course, once after you're done being introduced to Dreamfinder and Figment, you would technically be led into a different room. And this is really where most of the ride would stand out, because this is just where the real fun begins, as what I would explain. Just the original Journey into Imagination ride by itself had just had so much things to prove, and it definitely did that pretty well. And I'm honestly quite surprised with just how the ride turned out, especially in such the early years of Epcot Center. And it definitely did, like I said before, it definitely put a lot of smiles on people's faces, and it definitely made a huge memory for many people when they had the chance to experience such an amazing ride like this. And it's just sad to know that many people aren't able to experience such a ride ever again because they got replaced by something else that isn't as good than the original Journey to Imagination attraction, but it is definitely a better version of the secondary version of Journey into Your Imagination. The ride itself had many scenes to share, it had many creative things to share as well, and I definitely wanted to spark your imagination and let you know like what the imagination is all about, what you can use with that imagination, and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, this is what Tony Baxter wanted to do for the ride, and this is what he was directing these Imagineers to do. He wanted these Imagineers to just let their imagination go wild and just let Tony Baxter just tell them what you need to do and how you should do this and that. And Tony Baxter really, really loved being part of this amazing project, and I'm honestly happy on how it turned out. And it's a very, very amazing ride. Now, when you go into the art room where you would see Dreamfinder painting a mural on the wall, you would be directed towards all these other amazing creations that they made with the power of art in their sides, and it was just phenomenal. And this is really a great wonder of Tony Baxter and his entire lifeline when it came to creating these attractions. And he did quite a splendid job when making these kinds of things. I mean, of course, he didn't only make Journey to Imagination, but he also made a lot of different rides such as Star Tours, Big Thunder Mountain, and many more that you probably are familiar with. And I mean, he made most of the most amazing and legendary rides of all time, and he really did put out his effort when creating these attractions. Now, of course, after being let out of the creative area where the arts come along, you get sent into a room where you would be talked about nightmares and chilling words like shriek or killer can spark the mind like a thriller, and some more sparks like dag and blood and gory, and there a brainstorm, just like how Dreamfinder would say inside the ride. And this is where the nightmare section would be introduced. And of course, knowing Figment, he doesn't like the nightmare end of the imagination. So of course, when you go through the attraction, you can see Figment just hiding in front of a door and also trying to block it because he doesn't want those hideous and horrifying monsters to get through the book because he's just afraid of the nightmare. It's just a very, very impressive thing. As you all know, it's a very, very impressive attraction, and I'm very happy with how this ride came to be with Tony Baxter and the rest of the Disney Imagineers who were really putting their effort into this ride. And then, of course, once you're done with the nightmare scene, you get sent over to, the theater stage where you would see Figment dressed in a suit and top hat, and he would just be dancing around, talking to the guests on the attraction about what theater is all about. Some happy songs, some snappy dances, costumes and sets, spoofs and romances, kind of like how Billy Barty, who was the original voice of Figment, would definitely say in the ride of the original attraction. And of course, it was a pretty short scene, it wasn't as big or anything like that. But I mean, it definitely did show a lot of potential when it came to, what theater is all about. And then, of course, once you're out of that scene, Figment and Dreamfinder would lead you towards one of my personal favorite scenes of the original attraction, even though, like I said before, I never had the ability to ride it. You'd basically be sent over to this amazing room. And of course, in the original footage of the ride, I mean, you would really see how dark it is. I mean, it is absolutely pitch black. I mean, sure, you'll be able to see the blue particles that would be surrounding you as you're going down the little slope. And yes, there was a little slope that went downhill at this part of the attraction, and I mean, it wasn't like an actual drop or anything like that. It was just a small little steep hill, but nothing too intentional or anything like that. It was a pretty smooth thing. But of course, when you got into this scene, you would be introduced to, Dreamfinder wearing his scientific outfit, and he would basically be teaching you about Earth. like the planet Earth, and seeing skyrockets soar towards outer space, watch minerals change to crystal shapes, like all that kind of stuff. Like he would rhyme with you, and he would go along with you to teach you about what this entire section was all about when it came to scientific things. And it definitely did impress many people. Now, of course, this is just a recording of the original attraction on a platform called VRChat. But I mean, still, you can even imagine how the original attraction was like back in the day. And there are plenty of videos out there, excuse me, of the original attraction that would basically share with you what this ride was like. And I can't even imagine telling you how breathtaking what this thing was. And as I said, and I will keep saying it, Tony Baxter did a phenomenal job with this ride, and his creation of the Dreamfinder and Figment, and creating the ride by itself, the Imagination Pavilion, all that kind of stuff. They really wanted to make the Imagination Pavilion and the ride itself just stand out for the crowd to watch and see every time they went into the attraction, and it was honestly the most impressive thing ever. But after being sent out of that specific area of being taught about space and time and continuum and the planet Earth, basically at the very end of the scene, you would be introduced to Dreamfinder for the last time, and you would see Figment again. But you would be able to learn that with the imagination that anything is possible, and with the imagination, all it just takes is just one little spark, and to make your dreams and things come true, your dreams and wishes and all that kind of stuff. And it's honestly just very, very impressive. Now, of course, you're going to be sent into where you're going to see Figment for one last time, and you would see these images of Figment, which actually, by the way, is a fun fact. These were actually other presentations of Figment, because what Disney used was extra Figment models to create these scenes. And of course, they were basically puppets. They were basically puppets that were used for these scenes, and they would just take multiple recordings of Figment in different kinds of costumes, where you would see him as a superhero, as a weightlifter, as a scientist, as a theatrical dancer, anything like that, like someone who does theater. Like, you would see Figment in all these amazing costumes that the Imagineers created for this character, because, like I said, they had to make multiple shots and scenes to make this thing come to life. And of course, it took a lot of electricity and power, and it took a lot of time to process all these kinds of things. And you would see Figment for the last time, as I was saying again, and you would say goodbye to him, and then you would just get your nice little photo at the very end of the ride. And this ride was just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, I can't even imagine telling you how amazing this ride would have been, especially if it continued throughout the years. And because of the fact that Journey into Imagination, the original attraction, got shut down unexpectedly and got replaced by Journey into Your Imagination, because apparently Michael Eisner didn't like the original attraction by itself. He just called it too annoying. That was just basically it. But to technically end, the video here, like this entire ride by itself was just amazing. And I'm honestly very happy to see such a ride like that came to life. And it definitely showed a lot. And it really does suck to see such an amazing ride leave. But here's the hopes that maybe we'll be able to see an attraction like this again later on in the future. Don't know when, but hopefully later in the future, maybe we'll see Journey into Imagination with Figment go away, and maybe we'll see Figment get his home back and all that kind of stuff, which I'm certainly hoping for something like that someday, but we shall see what happens. But anyways, you guys, thank you guys for tuning in for today's video. And let me know what you guys think about the original Journey to Imagination attraction in the comments below. And what do you think was the best part about the original ride by itself? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, you guys, and keep sparking with your imagination. Peace out, you guys.